John.
Ryan,
Looking
good
good.
to see you.
I love the hair. I told you that last time. It's like I feel you're going to Hollywood, and I feel like I should let my hair grow out because
Well, the
it's.
question is whether it's distinguished or extinguished, but I'll leave that to the audience out there to decide.
I'll lean with distinguished. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm just flying back from Half Moon Bay, where I experienced uh, torrential rains and 30-foot waves off the coast of Half Moon Bay to the most beautiful Northern California day I've experienced in maybe about a year. It was just
You were at
incredible.
the Constellation meeting, I suspect.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Uh-huh.
sir. I got to see all of my colleagues that I have not seen on my team since before the pandemic, and actually hadn't seen since November 2019. So it was a wonderful family reunion. I also got to see Ray Wang, of course, the CEO and head analyst at Constellation and host of Constellation's Connected Enterprise, where we learned a lot about AI and data and the future of all kinds of experiences, but also organizational integration and operational models. So it was pretty fascinating.
He said that one of my moles at the conference said that one of the major topics was general concern in the C-suite about retention of talent and the Great Resignation. Did that track with your impression?
That was a certain arc of the theme for sure. In fact, many of the conversations were how do we retain talent, how do we attract talent, and one of the things that I would like to have seen more is a conversation around employee experience. I had a hallway conversation, really fascinating hallway conversation with the she'd be the chief growth officer, I imagine, with Wipro, and she shared this exact point, and we talked about how, like you design for customer experiences, you have to sort of design for employee, not sort of, you have to design for employee experiences. I gave her an example of a random research point from a pre-COVID study that I did, but still applicable nonetheless, that one of the most interesting tidbits that had come out was wasn't just the brand or the technology that a company uses. It's also the perceived culture of the organization and how it works and how it thinks about working, because that digital first brain has a unique way of just meandering through life. It doesn't necessarily follow the traditional protocol that maybe you and I have grown accustomed to over the last several decades. And one interesting point that had come out of the research was that if a prospect employee saw desktop phones in the office, that it was a subliminal or subconscious cue that might not be the right culture for them. And it was really interesting and sort of something you didn't expect to see, but then makes all of the sense in the world once you hear it.
Well, just another proof point that the hosts of Intersections actually have interesting things to say themselves.
Hey, to that point, John, I wanted to share. I saw our friend John Reed, who was a guest on a previous episode, and he wanted me to tell you how much he enjoyed his portion of the conversation with. Not that he didn't enjoy my portion, but he had very kind things to say about you.
Oh, well, nice to hear. Always good to get feedback.
Awesome. Well, on that note, our first guest is backstage already, and he's probably thinking, okay, guys, we're done with the banter. Let's go. So let's do the official introduction. Welcome to Intersections, the weekly conversational jam session that we have every Thursday at 10:30 a.m. Pacific, where we dive deep into the intersections among technology, innovation, culture, and ideas. Every week, we bring diverse personalities and worldviews together in the greater service of understanding, growing, and also unlearning. My co-host and co-founder is John Kao. The Economist has called him Mr. Creativity. He, as you can see, is making his move to Hollywood as well. He is a thought leader, entrepreneur, and advisor. He has been. There are people who talk about innovation, and there are people who do and teach innovation, and that is my friend, Mr. Kao. He taught at Harvard Business School. He also served as visiting faculty at the MIT Media Lab in Stanford. His career, his accomplishments are storied. and quite wonderful. He's also a Tony-nominated producer of film and stage. He's a student of jazz improvisation and piano, and he's quite a master himself. If you ever have an opportunity to watch him or listen to him play, he wrote our intro and outro music on the spot. So it's a little teaser of his talent, and he is an author at Forbes. He wrote the best-selling Jamming the Art and Discipline of Business Creativity, and make sure to follow his social accounts on Twitter and LinkedIn. Mr. Kao, over to you.
So, Brian, well, it's always a pleasure to reciprocate and to jam our way through these introductions. Brian is kind of like my missing half in the innovation sphere, and together I think we form a 360-degree view of networks and expertise and topics. Brian's been in the digital domain before it was really recognizable as a palpable issue for management, which is not that long ago, I have to say, but boy, how eventful things have been since. And linking digital to the subjects of innovation, marketing, social media, organizational integration, network management, brand building, etc. These have been his sweet spot lo these many years. He expresses his thought leadership via publications, endless keynote speeches. He's in demand constantly, and a massive social media profile that I must say was a big source of inspiration for me when, as someone who was kind of sometimes I'm ahead of the curve on technology, and sometimes I'm just, willfully trying to ignore it. And Brian's been an inspiration to me and to countless others in this sphere as well.
Always, we've had this conversation. I know we're going to have conversations about growing this show as well. It's interesting. There was a wonderful window. It was sort of like right time, right place, right message. I don't know that I could have recreated that online presence today. In fact, in many ways, I'm going back to school and learning. This is the conversation I had with John Reed at Constellation, because he's going through the same exercises as well as we study the live algorithms, as we study the discovery algorithms and how people discover new shows and podcasts. So always learning and unlearning to the true spirit of intersection. So with that said, John, thank you for the lovely introduction. And I'm going to turn it over to you to welcome our first guest.
Well, it's a real pleasure to introduce Bensaou, and I hope I'm pronouncing his last name correctly.
Very
Am
good.
I? It's
very good.
Good. Okay.
Excellent. Very good. French pronunciation.
Excellent. Well, La Belle France. We can't go wrong. And so when I learned about Ben's illustrious career, again, it kind of gave me a feeling of not exactly the road not taken, but a road that kind of diverged at a certain point, because, as you know, there was an academic phase for me at Harvard Business School, and Ben has really pursued the academic and research pathway to full flower. So currently, he's a professor of technology management and professor of Asian business and comparative management at INSEAD, which I'm sure you all know as the business school, preeminent business school located in Fontainebleau in France. He was dean of executive education there for several years, but also has done the grand tour as a visiting faculty member at Harvard Business School, a senior fellow at Wharton, and a visiting scholar at Haas at the University of California. Did his PhD in management from the Sloan School at MIT, and a master's degree in management from Hitotsubashi University in Tokyo. So really the grand tour, quite remarkable. I assume you know Hiro Takeuchi.
Absolutely, and just
Yes.
for the little detail, I'm actually joining you from Japan, from Kobe in Japan.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, I'm on my sabbatical at I'm doing my sabbatical at Kobe University.
Oh, how interesting.
Yes.
Well, it was probably good to be inside the COVID tent before things shut down there. And
absolutely.
We have a lot to talk about. Your field is innovation in all of its different formats, organizational innovation, partnerships, IT and organizations, Japanese management, and so forth and so on. I guess where I'd like to start is a question that I think about every day, which is if we're not in the era of our fathers or our grandfathers' innovation concepts and practices, where are we going? Where is innovation going? What do we need from innovation now? how has it changed in response to environmental factors, AI, data science, capital availability, and whatnot? And how should we, in a sense, reconceive of innovation so that it's relevant as opposed to an icon that we worship to varying degrees without necessarily being mindful about it?
Yeah, I think the qualification of it being iconic is really spot on, because over the many years I've been teaching, researching, or consulting on innovation, I noticed that many people equate innovation with blockbuster products, or like a life-changing new business model. Also, many think that you need to have a genius leader, or to be a startup to innovate. And I found that that's not true. Actually, during the research I've done over the years, I found that established, even century-old companies can innovate. How? Well, they don't necessarily only look for huge industry transforming effects, but also for small, important, and often in unexpected places changes. And how do they do this? They use continuous, systematic innovation. And this is, I think, an area in innovation that has been overlooked, and could be the future of innovation, in the sense that it is all about embedding innovation in the organization, innovation of all kinds, driven by everyone in the organization, not only the genius or the specialists.
When you talk with senior people, and they obviously recognize you as being an innovation a domain expert and thought leader, what is it that they present most commonly as being their chief complaint? I mean, if you were, a doctor doing the diagnostics, what are the chief presenting symptoms that bring them to a conversation with you?
Well, very, very often their main complaint is that they don't think that their organization is innovative enough. And very often it takes me a little to do a little audit, just to interview a few people, to realize that, as a matter of fact, their organization is their people are very innovative. And actually, this was kind of a surprising kind of finding for me, is that I found that senior leaders don't have a problem with innovation, because they're facing the environment, unpredictable, fast changing, and for them, innovation is a no-brainer. Frontline people, managers or employees, they're facing customers and non-customers on a daily basis, so they understand the urgency of innovation. But the ones who are shielded from it are the middle managers. And I found out that middle managers are actually pivotal to innovation, and they are very often overlooked. And they are the ones who don't have that direct pressure of innovation. So they need, I found that the thing to do is to unlock the middle managers and help them to create what I call in the book an innovating engine. A protected, legitimized space where everyone can innovate, not only the senior leaders and the specialists in R&D. You can innovate in everything you do, in your products and services, but also in your internal processes, in your functions. And innovating has to become a habit, not just a spur of creativity in times of crisis. So I think this is what people complain about. CEOs, C-suite people complain about not their organization being innovative enough, but in fact, it's a structural issue. They don't have what I call an innovating engine functioning in parallel to their very efficient execution engine.
So, does the innovating engine solve the problem of the innovator's dilemma? Because what I see very often is companies that feel they're very innovative and they've checked off the box, but really what you see is primarily incremental innovation, process improvement, product improvement, et cetera. and not the ability to reimagine their value proposition or to engage in what is popularly known as disruptive innovation, which involves changing the game board, changing the nature of the game. How does that track with your notion of the innovation engine?
Well, actually, this is coming back to your first comment about innovation being iconic, and actually in the book I make a very subtle distinction between the word innovation as a noun and the word innovating as a verb. Just to tell you my experience is that I get called quite often to, by C-suite people to help the organization be better at innovation. And I noticed that when I frame the program or the training as learning about innovation, that creates, I feel a sense of tension in the room, and I feel that people are afraid. I think that the word innovation, especially seen as iconic, as disruptive innovation, or like my colleague at INSEAD calls it, blue ocean strategy, that creates a lot of anxiety for people. But I noticed that and that happened in a very serendipitous way, if I start to talk about, we're here to learn about how to innovate, we're learning about innovating, the verb, then people understand immediately that this is about actions, activities. This is about a process. This is about a behavior. And of course, you can learn how to conduct activities. You can incentivize people into a certain behavior or attitude. So for me, the book, if you will, and my answer to your question is to say that, yes, of course, we can focus on innovation, which is, I refer to it as a tip of the iceberg, what we see above the water level. But we ignore what is under the water level, the bulk of the iceberg, which is what I call the innovating capabilities of the organization, the collective capabilities of the organization. And in a sense, I think that, of course, we need the geniuses, we need the disruptive ideas, but there's a lot of innovation that we miss, which is about building this collective capability that everyone can bring to the organization. And as you may know, the breakthrough ideas, we never know where they're going to come from. So the idea here is to enlist the capabilities of everyone in the organization. So sure, you can give people 10% of time, 15% of time to dabble, as they say at Gore, but I think it's important to systematize, to legitimize, to give permission to everyone to innovate, to give them the tools, the time, the space, to make it possible to institutionalize, if you will, innovation for everyone in the organization.
Who do you think out there today is doing it really, really well? There are historical examples, I suppose. Pardon me. Who in the contemporary landscape is doing innovation really well, would you say?
Okay, this is a very interesting question. I want to kind of, again, explain what is the focus of the book. So you will notice that in the book, I mentioned about what I refer to as the usual suspects, the Gores of this world, the 3Ms of this world, the high tech and the entertainment companies. But these are usual suspects. But I try to also bring some spotlight on established companies in industries that are not necessarily referred or thought of as being innovative as industries or as companies. So let me maybe give an example. I mean, I have quite a few in the book, of course, but let me highlight maybe Bayer. Bayer, the global pharmacology and life science company based in Germany. So this is a company with a very rich history of scientific achievements through its R&D. But in 2014, they decided to create what I call an innovating engine and leverage the capabilities of the 100,000 employees working in the company. So what did they do? First, they made the board, the whole board, responsible for innovation. Then they selected 80 senior managers across all country groups and global functions to support the board as innovation ambassadors. And these ambassadors spent most of their time with middle managers, explaining, advocating, supporting innovation. And then they did something really interesting. They built a fantastic support structure for the middle managers. Between 2016 and 2020, they trained and certified 1,000 innovation coaches locally activated across the whole world. And then for the frontline people, so we can come back to the role of middle managers here, but for the frontline people, they created We Solve, a digital platform where any employee in Bayer can post information about a problem they're struggling with and invite input and new ideas from anyone across the organization around the world. And they let me visit the site, the platform once, and at any given time, they have more than 200 challenges on the platform. They already have 40,000 people who have participated in WeSolve. And by the way, the platform is in English, and they have only 50,000 people speaking English across the company. So this tells you about the level of participation. And this will be also interesting to you. They tell me that 2/3 of the best ideas that are posted, that are given as answers to the posts, 2/3 of the best ideas come from a unit, a department or a function different from where the person who posted the challenge came from. So for me, this is a very good example of an established company. This is not your regular high-tech or entertainment company that you usually think of as being very innovative, but they've been able to create in a very systematic manner an innovating engine that enlists the capabilities of everyone. Sure. So if you will, my focus, the companies I try to bring is not the usual companies that we know are already, if you use a scale of 0 to 10 on innovation, very often we focus and obviously with good reasons, we learn a lot from the companies who are at 8 or 9. But here I wanted also to spend some time to try to understand the companies that were able to move from 4 to 7 or 8. And this is really what I'm trying to do, is to help established companies move from 4 to 7 to 8.
So I'm going to pass the conversation over to Brian in just a second, but I have one more burning question I've got to ask you. And it's probably not a short answer, but we should probably keep it a little short, which is with your great knowledge of Japan and Japanese business and being in Kobe and so forth and so on, where are things at in terms of Japanese corporate innovation these days? You know, there was a great heyday of all this innovation, and then there was kind of a pullback, and Japanese companies are no longer innovative, or they've lost their mojo. And where do things stand now?
Yeah, you're totally right. It's a question that would take a bit more time, because there are, of course, contextual reasons, like the educational system, the IP system, the relationship between industry and universities. But as a matter of fact, I would almost say that Japanese companies could have been very well positioned in building an innovating engine, because they're the ones who refine total quality management, building, embedding processes across the organization and lifting everybody up. And for me, what I'm talking about is actually total innovation management, if you will. Yeah. So it should be very natural step for them. But the problem is that you are dealing with a corporate culture and also a national culture where it is not necessarily easy to challenge the shared views, and so
Unless you drink a lot.
Unless you drink a lot. Yes.
Yeah. At a specific time. Yeah.
So if you will, Japanese companies have some elements that should allow them to build an innovating engine the same way that Western countries have a culture and people with a educational system that should allow them to contribute innovation. If we could just channel them and institutionalize. I mean, I should tell you, John and Brian, that even in Western companies, I find people, especially at the front line, who have a lot of ideas, but they feel afraid to submit them. They feel that they are being kind of blocked by middle management. So each style of management has its own challenge in building to innovate.
Well, maybe that's a subject we can pick up at some point in the future, because the cultural overlay on innovation is really fascinating. But let me pass it over to Brian. And since we took a little bit of time at the beginning of the hour, I think we're still right on track. So over to you, Brian.
Thank you. And it's an absolute pleasure for you to be here with us today. I'm taking notes furiously here, and appreciate the approach of which that you bring to innovation. Bayer is a wonderful example in that I also had the opportunity to work with them in Germany on that, which was empowerment towards innovation at the core of the organization. And one of the things that I appreciate about your approach to innovation is that it's inclusive, in that in many cases, innovators try to bypass middle managers, and
yes.
They are very core. In fact, I like to refer to them as either innovation stakeholders or those who are motivated as the change agents, because they can bring about the type of transformation that we need to see. I do want to come back to a couple of points you made, because I would love to learn how you're seeing ways to accelerate innovation when there is this misconception that innovation is something relegated to the Apples or the Teslas of the world, and that it's seen as this big, unwieldy thing that can't be tangible. And therefore, it's scary, it's risky, it's all of these things that make it easier not to approach. So at a human level, how do you bring the topic of innovation to middle managers and also to executives to get them to see that they're actually not being innovative today?
Right. I think this is a very interesting question, and by the way, that kind of should get us to look back to your kind of dialogue before we went on the show about how to retain talent, and I think creating an environment where everyone feels that they can innovate is a very important way to retain talent and to motivate people. So I think, again, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the role of frontline or the role of senior people, because I think a lot has been written about, and I can elaborate if needed. But I think the middle managers are really the ones who can unlock innovation. And I think the problem for them is that really they are evaluated and incentivized on execution, on delivering the strategy of today. And they don't have they don't necessarily have the understanding from the top, in particular, the communication from the top of why innovation is so important. They don't necessarily have the training, and more importantly, they don't have the resources. If individual people or teams come to see them and they want to work on innovation, they're not necessarily against that, but they wouldn't know what to do. So in the book, I give quite a number of examples of these companies like Bayer, and even sometimes even more traditional businesses like cement or fabric for tires. People were able to jumpstart the innovating engine by creating this resource where people would be systematically trained into innovation. In some companies, it started with the middle managers and was trickled down. I have an example of Corsa, for instance, this Turkish company where even the CEO does some of the training himself to just signal how innovation is important to everybody, and then it creates the middle managers. Now when somebody comes to see them, they have this almost this army of local coaches whom they can call upon to help their team innovate, and they teach them tools. Of course, you need tools. So what I discovered that for people to innovate, they need basically kind of three things. One, they need to feel that they are able, which means that they are allowed, they have the permission. And I think this is very important. As C-suite people don't necessarily understand how important it is for them to give permission to innovate. If they don't give the permission to innovate sincerely, people will not innovate. They will be too afraid. And then second, people need to feel that they are capable. So they need the time, they need the space, they need resources, they need training, and then they need to be motivated. They need to feel that their ideas are wanted. And then when they come up with ideas, they need to feel that they are acknowledged and recognized. So again, the idea here is not to just keep it as talks, but to actually have a formal structure, just like the execution engine, that has to function in parallel with the innovating engine, has a structure, a governance structure. You need to have also a governance structure for the innovating engine with roles and responsibilities, just like I outlined for Bayer. This is a very good example where you have roles for senior level people, mid-level people, and frontline people. You need also to have processes, just like your execution engine has planning, budgeting, all sorts of processes. What I talk about is the three processes of innovating. Creation, which is about generating lots of ideas. Integration, which is about connecting the ideas, but also connecting the ideas to people, to resources, and also channeling the ideas from the creation process to the execution engine. And this is very often through a stage gate kind of a process. And then the third process that, again, management has to look after is what I call reframing. The process by which you challenge the assumptions behind the strategy that you're actually right now implementing. And this is also something that is very important to keep an eye on.
This is the construct of, as you call it, an innovation engine, and I completely appreciate this, because what you're essentially saying is that we're creating, and it's even in your book title, that we're creating the DNA, which is essentially a culture of operating and working and living and creating new behaviors and new norms to work in this direction. And you reminded me of an example I want to share. I wrote a book for the Japanese market many years ago called Effect, which explored the demise of Japan's innovation engine, using many of the pioneers like Sony as an example, and focusing on that, the DNA, the hierarchy, the tradition,
yes,
the culture,
yes,
norms
yes,
that sort of prevented everything that you're talking about. And it reminded me, we have a friend who's been on the show, Dr. Mick Kirsten, and he wrote a book called From Project to Product. And he talks about the importance of the jumbo walk, which is a Japanese tradition of bringing executives and walking them on the jumbo floor, the warehouse, the manufacturing floor, so that everybody is connected to the core of the process. But I want to adapt that thinking into what you're saying, to a jumbo walk 2.0, if you will, which is you take executives at a traditional company and you walk them on the floors of Google or Apple, and you make them do a new type of jumbo walk, so that when they get back to work, to their offices, to their culture, that it just feels dated. It feels that you can see exactly what you need to do. So I just want to say, Ben, thank you for that. Our next guest is here, but I actually have 2 pages of notes of questions I was hoping to get to for you, but we'll hopefully have the gift of another time with you. Congratulations on your new book, Built to Innovate. Everybody, please take a look at the book. I know I will, because I took copious notes, and this is going to help me in my work.
Just
Ben,
came out.
Just came out, yes. Yes.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we hope to have you back on the show as well.
Well, John, Brian, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much.
Great to see you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All
Bye-bye.
right.
Bye.
Wow. That was.
Yeah.
I was so excited that I hit the wrong button. And
I was wondering what happened.
now I'm back. Wow. John.
Yes, sir.
What a guest. He broke it down. So I'm actually going to be reading this book. I'm gonna order this book. So our next guest is here. I'm excited. So before I bring him on, I just have to say something I forgot to do at the beginning of the show, which was welcome everyone. This is also your community. Please share with us where you're tuning in from, and also this is a participation sport. So share your comments and share your questions. We will have Ben back on too, so that we can get your questions to him. But with that said, our next guest is actually a longtime friend, someone whom I haven't seen. I think Dallas, Texas, at a Sabre Technology Forum was the last time I saw him. But let me bring him on here, and then I'll give him the official introduction. Rafat Ali is the guy. Well, he and I go back to the early days of Web 2.0.
Blogging days, early blogging days.
Blogging days. Yes, it's the dawn of like the golden age of blogging. And he is now the CEO and founder of Skift, which is, this is language. This is promo language. But I'm going to say something at the end. It's the most influential business media company in the global travel sector, providing news, research, events, and marketing services to key sectors in travel. Now I'm going to add my words to what Skift is. Skift is the gravity for innovation in travel and hospitality, for trends, and for also understanding what to do about it. And this is what's key to it, is that if you pay attention to Skift's work, that you, especially now in this pandemic Control-Alt-Delete moment for the travel and hospitality industry, like his banner says, defining the future of travel, you can actually start doing things differently right now, and you make up for a lot of lost time, because this new travel customer that we'll talk about is going to be completely different. And I just need to say that he was also the founder of Paid Content, which he sold to The Guardian, I think, out of the UK in 2008. We were friends way before that.
Yes. I think we were at the first ever blogging business conference back in like 2004, 2005 or something like that in Boston.
Can you believe there was a conference for blogging
for business? Yeah.
For business. Yeah. Even we were the original Kim Kardashians in our own way.
Oh my God. Well, thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, John.
It's our pleasure. So let's just jump right in. So because this is such a timely conversation, I've taken 3 trips in the last few weeks, so I feel like we've got a lot to make up for, and we got a lot to say in a short amount of time. So Rafat, what for people who were asleep the last 10 years of digital transformation and innovation, what is it that the travel and hospitality executive needs to understand now, beyond safety, beyond COVID measures, beyond what's going to be different when this new consumer awakes and starts getting on planes and boats and traveling like making up like for lost time?
Yeah, well, much like you, I think the consumer is awake at this point already, and the travel in countries like US and certainly different parts of Europe and some parts of Asia and others that are opening up are coming back with a ferocity. And this has been true really since last summer on the leisure side, where we saw just incredible demand for domestic short haul travel, driving distance travel. that continued this year during the summer. And this fall is when business travel was supposed to come back in a big way. Delta variant threw that a little bit off track, but I think those concerns are gone now. This is end of October almost. I would say July, August, September, or first half of September were concerns in the travel industry. It's the earnings season is happening now, so we're seeing some of that in the earnings for these public travel companies. But they're also saying that's past. It is coming back with some ferocity. I think you may have seen this. Maybe you're traveling for speaking at events again, but events are like everybody's doing events in these next few weeks. The events that were held back, the physical events that were held back for the last year and a half. So they're coming back. Like my LinkedIn feed is completely overtaken by people at different conferences. I was joking last month that taking a photo of your first trip to an event is like us taking photos of our food and posting on Twitter in 2007. And so that's what is coming back. So I think what it has shown is that there's an inherent need and desire for travel. This is a little bit an evolution from what March, April, May, June last year showed us, where we thought, maybe there's a good chance that a chunk of demand in the travel industry will be gone forever. Certainly, that's still unknown in business travel and meetings and events for which people travel for business. Meaning, overall, if you look at the umbrella of business travel, there's still some sense that maybe as much as 15 to 20% of business travel will be lost forever because of things like you and I are doing on this tech with Zoom and StreamYard and all these other tech that's happening. But certainly in the leisure side, at this point, I think it's going to come back to even higher number than pre-COVID numbers in the next couple of years. What has also happened, and this is we're covering this, and this is in line with everything else that's happening in the world and via the business sector, is prices are going up. Prices, I'm sure you've seen this in your travels, and you know this just from anecdotally searching. Prices for everything. Flights is high, short-term rentals is high, hotels is high. It's artificially high right now because capacity is coming back online right now. But I think it will actually end up being higher when things even normalize. It will stay at a higher base. Whether it's airline tickets, whether it's hotels, whether it's short-term rentals. I mean, Airbnb, I'm sure you've seen some of these numbers. You cannot find places in Airbnb. Inventory, especially over the summer, was just awful. And I talked to Brian Chesky, CEO of Airbnb, last month at our Skift Global Forum. He came. This was his first in-person conference that we did in New York. And he, for him, the biggest challenge is how do you bring on inventory? And so, if you can think of a bigger turnaround story in the last 18 months, I mean, I can't think of it, which is like Airbnb in March, April, May, June was a lot of people said, oh, it's done for, versus then the giant IPO that they had and then the business that they have now. So anyway, I can go on and on, but I'm just giving you a landscape view of where we are in travel. There's a lot of optimism. The world is opening up. US is opening up November 8th to the rest of the world. This is if you're vaccinated, you can come into US from anywhere in the world. So they've ditched all, whether it's red country, yellow country. This is what's happening in Europe, where they've put countries in buckets. US is opening up to anybody in the world. So anyway, there's a lot of optimism, and if anything, innovation has sped up. Digital transformation that has been happening in the travel industry that you've talked about for years as well, Brian, has only sped up in the last 18 months.
Absolutely. It's sped up, and it's also, I think, created a fissure in the trajectory of, I think a lot of people are seeing that the need for digitization, but also I think that they're not seeing the need for sort of this evolved consumer that's happening as a result. And this is why I think there's an opportunity to make up for lost time, in that the consumer trajectory has also changed. We as human beings have digitally transformed over the last 18 months.
Right.
We've been introduced to capabilities, services, benefits, conveniences in other industries that we weren't. Some of us, like the geeks on the left side of the bell curve, were already seeing this, but now the masses are waking up to these new things, and they're holding travel, hospitality, all kinds of consumer goods brands to these same standards. And I think this is where we have to pay attention to when we talk about the future of travel. What we're really saying is, how do you deliver a better experience using digital for a world that is transformed? So, for example, in our last conversation, I'm sure you heard that there really is this mindset between iteration, or let me put it this way, iteration and digitization. So we'll invest in all of these new things, these new trends. Our digital transformation itself will be focused on digitizing existing processes, check-ins, you name it. But then this idea of true transformation, which is, how can we use new technology, innovation to create new value? What does that consumer want? What is it that they don't know they want, and that we can deliver, knowing that we have an opportunity here to actually compete differently and to build a new brand for a new genre? So I guess my question for you, Rafat, is what are you seeing at the executive level, like the questions that you wish executives were asking and they're not?
I would actually say that executives certainly now are a lot more aware that we would have given them credit even 4 or 5 years ago in the travel industry. Everybody, there's nobody that's not on the mobile train. Like, the world is mobile, and mobile in all senses of that word, tech as well as humans themselves. Everybody understands the proliferation of channels, multi-channel, hydra channel, or whatever the phrase is, giga channel world. And I think travel companies are adapting to it. People are, I think the travel industry has realized that, mobile apps that they invested a lot in are barely used for most of the companies. And so, how do they create value into it? I think flexibility in terms of booking windows, in terms of choices and extra fees and others, all of that in the pandemic has certainly come to fore. Pandemic obviously introduced flexibility to a lot of bookings that historically travel industry had taken away over the years. I don't think all of them will stay, but I think a chunk of them will stay, which obviously as a consumer delights you, because if you can do changes on your travel and tickets, etc., there is an understanding, and this is a digital transformation happening at a lot of large companies. This is you're showing this research report, the middle one. There's so much activity in the payment space. It is reflective of the activity in the fintech space overall, right? This is not just travel. There's so much, as I'm sure fintech is probably the most exciting, the most activity-filled tech sector of all today. Billions, trillions of dollars in there, for good reason. And I'm not even talking about crypto. I'm talking just fintech. There's so much happening on the hotel, airline side, on the fintech side. There's also new innovations coming where finally sort of what we're calling the financialization of travel is happening, meaning for the last 20, 25 years, the online booking experience has been the same. It's a search box. You go to any site. It's a search box. You put in your destination from here to there, dates, etc. It will spit out a bunch of options, right? That's been the case for the last 20 years, 25 years. There's a bunch of milestones over the last decade where there were opportunities for that to change. Didn't happen. Voice didn't happen. VR, AR didn't happen in travel as everybody expected it to be. On the finance side, there's innovation coming, whether it's price freeze or pricing. So I don't know if you know this company called Hopper. Hopper is the one that's coming now. It's competing against Expedia, Booking, etc. Mobile-only company has, I wouldn't say come out of nowhere. They've been around for 10 years. But what they're bringing in on the consumer side is innovation in the booking process. And so which you pay for. So for instance, if you want price freeze on your ticket for X number of days, you pay $15 extra, things like that. So those are just a basic example, but that's coming to a lot of other sites and booking process. So that's an exciting area. There's a lot of movement in mobile wallets that then make the ultimate dream of seamless travel. Seamless travel has been a buzzword in the travel industry for the last 10 years. I think we're as close to seamless travel as we will be today. And all of that starts with payments becoming more seamless through simple, not simple, but existing things like Apple Pay and others that are there. I mean, transport itself is being transformed because of how payments are happening across networks. So just to say that there's a lot of innovation. I think the travel companies the CEOs are aware more than they've ever been. The last thing I'll add is, and I'm sure you've been talking on your show in many different ways, is the topic of sustainability, as in climate change and travel, is a question that's coming up so much, came up at our conference a month ago. Everybody's announcing goals of net zero in the next 20, 30, 40 years. Airlines are under a lot of pressure. Hotels are under a lot of pressure. Large companies that spend on business travel are under a lot of pressure. So what you've seen in the last, I would say this year, is the giant buyers of travel, all the big consulting firms, IBM, Deloitte, all these others, have announced that they will cut their business travel. Hence, they will cut their climate, their carbon footprint. And so that's creating a lot of pressure on CEOs in the travel industry. And so they have to adapt as well. So it's fascinating times.
It is. And John, I'm going to throw this over to you. I just want to make one last comment too, that, in my work, I work with executives at some of the most, let's just say, well-known brands in travel and hospitality, and some of the most beloved, and some of the conversations that we're having, and you brought this up. This is why I wanted to make this point. A lot of the conversations that we're having is that you're right. They totally get that they've gotten it for several years. COVID has accelerated this for sure, that digital and innovation and transformation are sort of the core of their relevance in the future. But at the same time, you made an interesting connotation around Hopper. And Hopper is, like you said, mobile first. And what I want to just spotlight for a second is that mobile first is not just a way of user experience design for a new app or service. Mobile first is a mentality. Mm-hmm. It is ingrained in a consumer. A mobile first consumer is distracted. They're moving fast. They make fragmented decisions. They're honestly often anxious just because the mobile technology itself does that to you. So these are the core values and behavior sets of a new type of consumer that I think travel executives are just kind of disconnected with. They're not that consumer. So this is why when they design an app, it gets poor adoption, because the app wasn't designed for that brain. And that's probably a topic we could have for a different conversation. But I think that design isn't just for the apps or the websites, but also for in-person physical experiences. We could reimagine a lot of things for that brain. And so this is less of a question, and maybe something you'll talk about at your design conference in December, but this is a big deal for me. And I think that this is that Jumbo walk that we talked about in the last conversation, or the undercover boss moment, if you will, where executives just aren't their consumers until they see it and feel it. Then that's when they're motivated. So John, with that long-winded diatribe, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, I've got a couple of quick questions for you that have to, well, first of all, you go to a travel agent because they know you and they can anticipate what you might find delightful. And if you've worked with them for a long time, they actually know where you've traveled in the past, what your family situation is, what you're working on that might be inspired by a different trip, and so forth and so on. So it gets very psychological, psychographical, social variables all kind of integrated into the intuition of the travel agent. When I then look at some of the standard online platforms, because I'm trying to design a vacation for my family this for the holidays at the end of the year, there's nothing like that. I mean, it's basically you want Hawaii, you want sun, you want Mexico, how much you willing to pay, the end. And with data science and the ability to, in a sense, create a digital persona that can act with an ocean of content and opportunities and so forth and so on, we're on the threshold of disruption in many different areas. And I'm wondering the extent to which next generation data science and AI are beginning to show up in the travel industry to basically transform the end user experience.
End user experience, yeah. So it's interesting. You use the word design when I'm trying to design a trip, which is an interesting phrase that you used, because travel agents now call themselves travel advisors. They're not agents anymore. Some of them even call themselves travel designers, which is a little highfalutin as far as I'm concerned. But I do see the point of advisors, because they're not like agents working for commission. They are people that understand your needs and are able to provide a service. The travel industry, as I said, I think is still trapped. The online travel industry, what we talked about, is still a little bit trapped in the search box. The first innovation that came 25 years ago, when the first online travel booking engines came, and have basically stood there. There was some thought that voice search and others would change that, but it hasn't come in the way. It was said that messaging apps would change how people book travel, but that hasn't happened. Certainly not in the Western world. It may have happened in China and a few other countries. So some of those changes, the conversational AI type experience that you would think on in a booking process hasn't been there yet. It's a very complex problem. And I don't think the solution is going to come from the travel industry. The solution is going to come from the larger tech industry that then gets adopted by, if I know Facebook is not the favorite company these days, but if Facebook were to solve the conversational AI problem, then it would come to travel as well. From a booking perspective, what has happened, there were attempts at it, but again, didn't really play out, is a hybrid model where there's a base level of AI in, say, let's say chat type technology, chatbot technology, and then humans pick up human agents, advisors, whatever you want to call them. So, there were a few startups, I would say 5 to 6 years ago, that were funded, particularly in the business travel space, because business travel is more contained, the variables are more known. And so, but most of them failed. Because business travel has its own challenges, where these tools that have been used forever by these large companies have not changed. Hence, there's less motivation for large companies to adopt them. They've been bought by some of these startups have been bought by larger companies, and then sort of got lost in there as well. So your point is well taken, which is that the intuitive ability that humans bring to travel planning has not come through tech today in travel. What has happened, though, is that travel agents have made a comeback to some extent, in the sense that if you're for a certain set of people, it's not being used for the daily, day-to-day things that you and I are traveling for. But if it's a family trip or more luxury trip, certainly a lot of cruises in the US are sold through travel agents, because there's more of a complex buy. The demographic matches to it as well. But on the luxury side, travel agents are doing well, and they have a renewed case in these times, because the traveling has become so much more complex.
Yes.
All the stuff. So yeah.
And speaking of that, so I'm wondering if Skift has ever considered a B2C publication channel, because just looking over the newsletter, I see plenty of stuff that I, as a kind of I guess I'd have to call myself a sophisticated traveler, find
Super
quite
traveler,
interesting and relevant. And if you're not planning to do a B2C version, who's out there kind of curating the best end user information which
Oh,
isn't
I
just
see. We
about
just did
cool
a story
places
on
to go.
kayak
But
through Hopper. It's funny. The first story is a kayak now lets you freeze through Hopper. We were just talking about a version of this
right.
5 minutes ago. So who's talking? So it's interesting you say that. So if you look at the first pitch deck of Skift, one of the first early pitch decks, which our idea was to, this is 9 years ago, so Skift has been around since 2012.
Right.
Our idea was to first tackle the B2B, become experts at the industry, and then do news you can use for the consumers. That was the idea. As happens in every startup journey, that was the plan, didn't end up being the actual final business. We didn't end up going there. We do have a consumer audience of your type, in the sense that super travelers who are aware, who are maybe in the tech industry, are just super aware travelers, want to know what's happening in the travel industry. But it's not a business for us today.
Right.
Travel news, consumer travel news, is hard. It's true for any type of media. But if you look at travel media in general, none of them have made a giant digital leap into the web. The travel guidebooks, Lonely Planets and others, are sort of a shell of themselves. The travel magazines, Condé Nast Traveler and Travel + Leisure and others, Travel + Leisure actually got sold to a vacation rental company, and now they're doing well because they're part of a larger company. Have not made the digital leap. And part of it is a result of, Google. If you people say, what's the best travel discovery engine in the world? It's Google. Like, everybody goes to Google, they start there. So it's not, so it hasn't really broken out. That's why consumer news of the type you would expect an equivalent of Skift on the consumer side. There's sites focused maybe on airlines, for instance, the Points Guy, which is a consumer site focused on, they cover points, but they also cover the larger things as well. Now, I would say they're probably closest at this point.
Well, I'll be now looking at your website regularly, and I just signed up for your newsletter. Brian's smiling because he's probably already deeply into it, and I think it's really terrific what you're doing. So thank you very much. Back to you, Brian, and I think thus almost endeth another show.
Yes, indeed. Well, Rafat, I would love to have you back again, and hopefully we could do some work together.
Would love to, yeah. Hopefully we won't wait for another Dallas to meet at a random hotel in Dallas next time.
Yes, very true. It was a pleasant surprise too, bumping into you in the lobby, we have lots to talk about, and I think this is going to be you're again at the right place, the right time. You have been since 2012 with Skift, but I think this is a new renaissance for you in the company because you're needed more than ever.
Also, the travel industry. I think that there's a near-death experience of the industry, and certainly a near-death experience for us in the last 18 months. And now on the other side, the travel industry is coming back with a ferocity, with renewed consciousness of all the things we talked about: tech's central place in the world, climate change central place in the world, consumers leading as the central place in the world. So we'll see what happens.
Indeed, and you will be at the forefront of all of it. So everybody, if you're curious to see what's going to happen, or if you want to be a part of it, visit Skift, read their research, subscribe to the newsletter. Rafat, I'll see you next time, my friend.
All right, thank you again.
Rafat, thank you.
And here we are.
There we go.
The end of another episode. Thank you all for tuning in. You are part of this community. We are going to be undergoing some changes here for the better to grow our community and to bring in great guests continued, and then also work on ways to deconstruct the conversations that we have so that they're not ethereal in this live world, and that their recommendations live on. Like, for example, with Rafat and what we need to think about in terms of travel and hospitality with Ben, and the pillars he laid out for us in terms of how to build an innovative company. And so there's a lot that we can take away from each one of those conversations. So, John, always a pleasure. I'll be talking to you maybe hopefully tomorrow.
Great.
And
I'm around.
To everyone else, we will see you next week.